Good evening and welcome, everybody. I'm Terry Kay of the Jewish Grandparents Network. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Welcome to the Seder, Grandparents' Role in Embracing All Family Members at Passover. We are thrilled to co-host this gathering with our friends at 18 Doors, and we are delighted to welcome our presenter, Rabbi Jessica Lowenthal. May I say a big thank you to Sarah Reed, our JGN colleague, who is helping facilitate. So our plan is that from 7 to 7:55, Rabbi Jessica will present ideas for hosting a welcoming Seder, and we'll include your questions. So please feel free to put them in chat, to raise your hand, and we'll stop at appropriate moments. And Rabbi Jessica said it's fine for us to jump in with questions. Then at around 7:55, for about 15 minutes, we're going to open up the floor to you. We change up the format and invite you to share your own fun and playful ideas for engaging children at the Seder. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Molly Kaysen-Marshall. Molly is Director of Community Engagement and Special Projects at 18 Doors, and Molly will introduce Rabbi Jessica. Over to you, Molly. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Terry. So I am with 18 Doors, and we are an organization that works with Jewish and interfaith couples and families to help them grow their confidence in doing Jewish, however that may look in their lives. We're so excited to have Rabbi Jessica Lowenthal here with us tonight. She has been passionate about opening the gates so that all who are part of Jewish families are seen as full members of the community. She was a former Reugen Rabbinic Fellow at 18 Doors and a rabbi at a synagogue in the greater Boston area with at least 65% interfaith families. Rabbi Jessica has taught many different ways for families to navigate questions and diverse traditions, and I'm so excited to hear what she has to share with us this evening.
Thank you so much, Molly. And thank you, Terry and Sarah. It's just such a wonderful opportunity to be here with everybody. And thank you all for coming and joining this conversation. So I want to start out by saying a couple things. Number one, this isn't really a how to do a Seder. If that is something that you're looking for, no worries, because there's some amazing resources that we're going to put in the chat throughout the evening, including the Discovery booklet. So there's great resources if you're looking for some ways to spruce up your Seder just generally. And the second thing I really want to start out by saying is there's no 100% correct way to do a Passover Seder. These are your rituals. You are allowed to change them, to restrict them, to expand them. You're allowed to be playful and creative. It's really important that everybody takes it to heart. It's important to me that you take this to heart, that there's no wrong way to do a Seder. There are a few key components, and we will be touching on them, but your Seder can take 10 minutes. Your Seder can take 10 hours. Don't let your Seder take 10 hours. It could take a few hours. And both of those are correct, and everything in between is correct. So I just want to start off by saying, however you end up doing your Seder for your family, that's the right thing to do. And don't feel like you're living up to some crazy expectations. Okay. Now that I've gotten that out of the way, I also want to say that if you want to post any of your questions in the chat, you're welcome to, and I will try and keep my eyes open. And I'm sure somebody on the team will alert me if I'm missing a question or anything. Okay. Before I start talking, I want to ask you guys a question, and you can answer it in the chat. The question is, what is your favorite Passover memory? What is your favorite Passover memory? Top 5, somewhere up there. Answer in the chat, and I'll come back to it in a little bit. So one of the first things we start with is really the values that we're bringing to creating this Seder. everybody who is here because they care deeply about their family members, because there are people in their family that were not born Jewish, follow perhaps a different tradition, come from a very different background. And you're here because you want to embrace them and bring them into this ritual that is such a serious and significant part of our Jewish identity. So with that being said, values is always a really good place to start. One of the first things that we talk about when we talk about Passover Seders is we were strangers in a strange land, right? We were strangers in a strange land is repeated in the Torah over 74 times. It is one of the core elements of what makes Judaism, Judaism. The fact that we went through the Passover story, the fact that we went through Exodus, is a core part of our identity. And it reflects an interesting thing about Judaism, which is that we're incredibly particular and incredibly universal, right? This is a particular story about our heritage, but as we know, this story is such a universal understanding of what it means to be a minority in a different majority. And many, many different peoples are able to relate to that. So strangers in a strange land, first thing we're doing is reminding ourselves that we are going to be just as welcoming as we hope that people were for our ancestors. Next one is Haknasat Orchim, hospitality. Again, a really big core of Judaism. We know Abraham is kind of the patriarch of hospitality. The quintessential story for Abraham, right, is that as he was recovering from his adult circumcision, he saw 3 men coming towards him and he leapt up, right, in his intense amount of pain and still welcomes them in and brought them in and washed their feet. Hospitality doesn't have to go quite that far. Please don't jump up after any surgeries, but just keeping that in mind and leading with an open heart. Anytime you feel like you're not sure or you're worried that you're going to say something wrong, honestly, if you're starting from a place of openness and curiosity, a place that's heartfelt, that comes across. And so I really do want to say, like, leading from that place means that you can take some more risks. You can put yourself out there a little bit because everybody in your family knows that you're coming from a place of love. And Passover is all about checking in with each other, asking questions, and being curious. Next, we have let all who are hungry come and eat, right? This is pretty big for Passover. And let all who are hungry come and eat. Another reminder that this is actually not supposed to be only for Jewish people. Most Seder, I grew up thinking you had to have non-Jewish friends and family come to Seders. Like that was a really big part of my family's traditions. Being welcoming, exposing, parts of Judaism to our friends who might not see it all the time. Bringing people who are themselves a minority into our Seder. That was such a normal thing. I actually didn't realize people didn't do that all the time. So everybody's family here is in really perfect company. Then in every generation, each person should see themselves as if they personally were slaves in Egypt. Now, this is a really big part of the Haggadah itself. And it's kind of an impossible task, right? We could never actually understand what it feels like to be enslaved. And we know that there are people in this world today who absolutely do know what it feels like to be enslaved. And sometimes that can feel strange to us because we're like playing at this role. But the reason we're asked to do this is to increase our empathy, is to keep the memories as alive and as like part of our souls as possible, and to work on seeing these patterns in the rest of the world. So when we are embracing our non-Jewish family or our family members who are coming from different backgrounds, you're doing the work, right? You're living up to exactly what the Haggadah is asking you for. And then finally, this is an interesting one, but we were told that a mixed multitude went out from Egypt. Now, this can be understood in many different ways, some not as great, but I've always understood this to mean that we've never traveled alone. We've never traveled alone. And one of the things I actually want to talk about is how you can bring women and non-Jewish characters into the story, because this story, Exodus, starts with a lot of amazing women who were not Jewish. And the fact that they were so integral into our survival, I think is telling us a lot. And when we left Egypt, we brought with us our friends and our family who came from different backgrounds and who still wanted to travel with us, who said, no, we're putting our lot in with you. And we are one community, even though we might look a little different, even though we might come from different backgrounds, we're saying, yes, we're choosing each other. And if that was the history, even in the Exodus, we're not doing anything crazy when we're sitting around with our integrated families today. Okay, there is a lot of history in the idea that our Jewish people have never really been traveling alone, especially in the Bible. So I want to just note that I've been looking at a bunch of your responses and seeing people see each other for the first time, perhaps, in many years. But I've been looking at a lot of responses, and one of the similarities that's coming out is it is about the people, right? Your favorite memories are about who you were with and probably what you were eating, like that's in there as well. But those connections, having that time with your loved ones, that's what sticks with you. And that's what's going to stick with your family as well. So again, just to reiterate, you don't have to do every single thing in the Haggadah, okay? You do not have to do that. I don't want everybody to be like checking how many pages are left, we're doing the countdown clock. That's one way to do it, but it's not my way to do it. And it doesn't have to be your way either. Many, many different ways are good. And you have the power to choose the way that you are going to do your Seder.
Jessica, just to jump in, I'm also noticing in the comments, there's a lot of talk of the family and food and song. There's a lot of talk of music. It would be, should we read a couple? There's so much fun.
Yes. If you have one with the music, can you read it? I'm going to search for some of them.
Here's Avery, who is our director of community engagement, says she remembers making chopped liver with a great grandmother's meat grinder and the whole mishpocha.
And Ellen Tillman says, when a guest opened the door for Elijah and someone dressed as Elijah entered the house, he was so shocked he fell down. Yes, if you have anybody willing to do that's quite memorable. Teenage cousins together at the far end of the table, singing at the conclusion of the Seder, somewhat inebriated after 4 cups. Yes, this was my first taste of wine as well. My father, who is still alive, singing Chad Gadya loud and strong in South Africa. Thanks, Terry.
It says, I've done Passover with family for 76 years.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It's just really wonderful. Okay, so there's a question about the midwives, which I was going to talk about, so we might as well go in there now. So you probably can think of, right, the Bat Pharaoh. She's a really important person. She is the one who saves baby Moses, brings him up out of the water. Miriam, his sister, had been right there. And when Bat Pharaoh, the daughter of Pharaoh, decides, I am going to keep this child, she sees that he's Jewish, right? She sees he's circumcised. She understands what her father intends to do with this community. And she still says, no, I'm going to defy my father. I'm going to raise this child within the palace or as my own. And in case you didn't pick this up, the reason that Moses knows who he is and knows that he is Jewish is because Miriam pops out of the bushes when she sees the daughter of Pharaoh holding baby Moses and says, oh my gosh, what a cute baby. I happen to know this woman in town. She just gave birth. If you're looking for a wet nurse, I can bring her over. And the daughter of Pharaoh says, yep, that would be great. And bam, Moses' mother becomes his wet nurse and raises him for really his youth. So that's why he understands the situation he's in. But also later on, right, Moses marries Zipporah, a Midianite priestess. And she is continually referred to as Midianite. So she does not convert. They live and they have children together. They have a full family life. And this is a integrated family. And then for the midwives, there's a big question, right? Jewish traditional thought says that the two midwives, Shifra and Pua, were actually Yocheved, Moses' mother, and Miriam, Moses' sister. But Abarbanel was a Portuguese late 1400s rabbi. And he says, actually, I wanted to read it because I totally agree with him. He says, they were Egyptian women who were midwives for the Hebrews. How could Pharaoh expect Hebrew women to kill Hebrew babies? I think he raises a really good point. And I have always thought that these were Egyptian women who just happened to be assigned to the Hebrew enclave who were making this decision not to follow orders. So there's many, many different ways that you can see the diversity within our story. And that's a really wonderful thing to raise up during the Seder as well. We're told that the more you expand upon the story, the more the more merit you get. Definitely take this time to expand on these incredible women and the diversity within the story. It is a nice gateway, right? That can be a really nice gateway into having a more personal conversation. I was using the term bat Pharaoh, which bat just means daughter. The Torah doesn't have a name. I think our tradition has her name, but I can't think of it at the moment. Okay.
Rabbi Jessica, I just wanted to note that I put in chat inviting our guests to put their questions in, also to note that many people sent in questions in advance. You have them and you're going to weave them in.
Exactly. Great. So I will say some of the questions that we got beforehand are talking about length of Seder. So again, whatever your Seder length is correct. And we're going to get to some more specific things that we can put into action later in the hour. So I want to take a moment and talk about how useful it is that this holiday happens to come in the spring, because there is a lot of spring holidays that share a lot of the same ideas, right? Regrowth, rebirth, renewal, a lot of the RE words. And it's a great place to connect with other people in our family. So the most obvious connection is Easter, right? And there's a lot that's been written and a lot that you can talk about between the similarities between Easter and Passover. Yeah, it can get, there's a lot to say, so I'm not going to say it all now, but there are other holidays as well. So Holi is a wonderful tradition in India. It is, again, a celebration of spring. It's incredibly colorful. So if you have someone in your family who comes from that tradition, this would be a wonderful time to ask them about it, to share their experience and kind of what the holiday means to them, and how they might be hearing some echoes in the Haggadah as well. There's the spring solstice, right? So again, the renewal idea. Judaism is a very lunar focused tradition. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot of similarities between solstice and Passover. And you'll see some interesting things on the table, right? That you'll see in all of these other celebrations as well. Eggs, greens, parsley in particular. So these are all places where, like when you're going around at the very beginning and saying, what's on the Seder plate? This is a great place to say, do any of my family, do any of our friends have similar traditions that use any of the things on this plate? right? That's a nice opening question that people can engage with. So for little ones, for grandchildren, it's it really does matter on these kids. I have two boys, 5 and 6. They are the most hyper children I've ever met. They do not color, they do not sit. Even Legos is kind of a little too like down for them. So for them, I have to make sure that they have things that they're in charge of. So my oldest is 6. He knows he is in charge of teaching Max the 4 questions. So he learned the 4 questions a couple years ago, and now it's his job to teach his brother. And that way, during the Seder, they're going to go off for a little bit of time, practice, and then they'll come back. I'm a big fan of plays. So there's also like a lot of, I don't know, like accoutrements these days about plagues. There's masks, there's hats, there's games, there's like a lot of stuff out there. You can have your kids, however old they are, as long as they're not teenagers, because this is probably too late for teenagers. But tell them you're in charge of telling the story this year. You guys have 20 minutes. Go into the other room, come up with a story, come up with a play. And when you're ready, you'll come back and you will be the Maggid. You'll be part of the Maggid section. You're going to tell us the story through your play. Make sure they have some costumes, they have some cool things. And that way, by the way, you get a little bit of adult time as well. So send the kids away for a little bit, put them in charge of something, have a few moments of adult conversation, and then you can bring them back in. And then I remember there was one person who said that it's a little late, the Seder time, especially right now, it's a little late for their kids. There's nothing wrong with doing a children's Seder first, right? That's really focused on singing, really focused on acting, really focused on like engaging sections. And then saying, okay, good job, you guys, you did the Seder. Maybe they even like do a full bedtime, and then the adults can have Seder afterwards, like the adult Seder. So these are all options, depending on the size of your space and who's there and what the ages are.
Rabbi Jessica, Pam raises an issue that I know I struggle with too, and you mentioned the plagues.
Yeah.
This year I did go and buy plague masks, but I sort of hid while I did it because it's making a mockery, it's making a light and so on. But the kids love it, is the thing. I even ordered ping pong balls to throw for hail. Don't ask. Anyway, Pam asks how, Pam says they struggle to make the Exodus story understandable and avoid the very dark aspects of it, like the death of the firstborn. Can you help us with that?
Absolutely. Yes.
Excuse me, Terry, we use styrofoam balls.
Just don't use baseballs. Ends up badly for somebody. Yeah, so I struggle with this as well. And Terry, exactly the same. I felt so uncomfortable. I still do feel quite uncomfortable with the fact that the plagues are the only section that have gotten this like intense commercialization. But I run a model Seder for 50 kids and they love it. My kids love it. I've kind of given in. But you're very correct that this section in particular is really difficult, especially for young kids. So number one, kind of playing it down, right? Not spending a lot of time on it is perfectly fine. There's a lot of other sections that you can spend more time on. But how to understand the Exodus, how to understand this story. It's a dark story, to be very honest. This is not a easy part of our history, right? We are talking about a time where we were persecuted, where we were enslaved for 400 years, right? And that is generations upon generations upon generations of people born into this reality. And one of the reasons that the Haggadah asks us, right, to feel as if we were personally slaves in Egypt is because the goal of the Seder is to start in slavery and to end in freedom, right? We're supposed to go on that path with the Haggadah. If you make it to the end of the Seder, I know plenty of families who stop after the meal, but if you kept going, right, you're going to be celebrating freedom to the point where it says, right, Lishna Haba Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, which would have been, right, for most of our history, the ultimate redemption, the ultimate moment of freedom. I talk to my kids about hard stuff in very age-appropriate ways. You know, like, this is part of a story. This is a story of part of our people a long, long time ago. And there were some very bad things that happened. And there were some really mean people. And they didn't like us because we were different. And so we suffered for a long time because we were different and we weren't allowed to do certain things. And we were really sad because of it. And then one day, Moses got a call from God, right? And was told, you actually have a mission in this world. Your mission is to go and talk to the Pharaoh and try and save your people, redeem your people. We all have a mission in this world. And this world is not kind. Our missions are all going to be difficult. They're all going to go through dark places. But when you are able to see that through, when you find your mission in this world, like Moses did, most of us don't get a call from God to do it. So we have to do hard work to figure it out ourselves, right? And this is why I tell my kids a lot, you have something to do in this world. You were put here for a reason. And throughout your life, you're going to figure out that reason. And when things get hard, you can't give up. And when things seem impossible, you have to have hope and you have to have faith. And this is a story that helps us see that even in really scary, dark times, somebody had a lot of hope and faith, and they were right? In the end, Moses succeeded, and we were able to leave. We were able to leave. Right? That's one way to position this story. Again, it really matters on your kids and what they've experienced so far. I'll just say we had to put our dog down a week ago, and it was my oldest son, my children's first experience, right, with death. We spent the whole week talking about death. So some kids are much more primed for certain conversations than others. And you know where yours are, you know where your grandkids are, and you can use their real life examples to help fit this story into a schema that they will understand. But don't shy away. I would say don't shy away. Okay, for
Jessica, Sharon had a question. Sharon, would you like to pose your question?
Yes, Rabbi, you've really been wonderful in reframing the Seder experience for us. What if you have Seder guests who don't believe in God, and they don't, and their young children will be there, and they're very sensitive about their young children hearing God language?
Yeah, great. So, I really talk about mythology, right? These are Jewish myths. If you are coming from a place where you are not believing, right, that there is an active God or that there is an entity that is God, that is fine. You actually really don't need to believe that in order to be Jewish. There's lots of other reasons that you're Jewish. But these stories are teaching us something. What are the lessons we're getting out of this? Who are the characters, right? Who is the character of God in this story? Does this character remind you of anybody in your life? Oftentimes we talk about God as a parent, right? Putting it in parent-child relationship can be really helpful. What does it mean to be punished, right? The punishments in the story are certainly beyond, but the idea can be very similar, right? What is the role of timeouts? Why do you need to go to your room sometimes? Do you need time to calm down and time to be alone and time to kind of think about what's going on and come to a different conclusion, right? Those are lessons we can be getting from the story as well. So you don't need to believe that this is exactly what happened. We have no historical record of an Exodus. And by the way, there are records of Egyptian economics that go back to what this time would be, around 2500 before the Common Era. There doesn't seem to be a huge change in the economic situation in Egypt. So I cannot tell you that this is absolutely a truthful, factual, historical story. Okay. We've been telling it for over 2,000 years. It's our mythology. This is a core part of our story. And that is the most important part. Does that help, Sharon?
Yes, it was fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I want to keep going to some practical stuff. So, and by the way, I have all of these on slides. I'm going to share them at the end, and you'll all get a copy of the slides that have kind of the summary of each thing that I'm talking about. So you don't have to be like madly taking notes, no worries. All right, so I know that many people have like a kids section and an adult section of the table. If that works for your family, great. But I want to throw it out there that actually interspersing all of our ages together can be really helpful for kind of breaking down some of the barriers that our family that are from different backgrounds might be coming into the Seder with. Because kids will ask questions, right? Kids have no problem being like, I don't get it. Why are we doing that? Why are we dipping this in salt water? Why are we doing that? To have a child ask the question for you can be really helpful and really opening, or to say, you know, I agree with the kid over here. What does that mean? You know, the kids can be an incredibly useful participants in this. And use the children as your mouthpiece. Talking about how much Hebrew are you going to use in the Seder? I feel I love Hebrew. I'm a terrible person with languages. It took me many, many years and tears to kind of conquer biblical Hebrew. But there's something really special, right, about hearing some of these passages in Hebrew, halach ma'an Aramaic, actually. And so if you want to preserve that, I totally feel that. One of the things I always say, most Jews don't speak Hebrew either. We don't know what we're saying, right? So for everybody who is not fluent in Hebrew around the table, just putting that out there and saying, you know, I'm going to use some Hebrew. I just want you to know, I don't know what this says. I might know it now because I've been saying it for 70 years, but you know, you're not outside, right? You who are coming from different places, you're not missing some like secret Hebrew knowledge. We don't know it either. So don't worry about that, right? Sometimes saying this stuff out loud is really important. And also, not using Hebrew is completely valid. One of the reasons that halach ma'anya is in Aramaic is because we're supposed to actually understand what it says. It's not in Hebrew because Hebrew wasn't the spoken language at the time when they were really putting together the idea of Seder. Aramaic was. It's the same reason that Mourner's Kaddish is in Aramaic. We're supposed to actually know what we're saying. So updating that to say we're going to use English is fully in line with our tradition as well. So having an English-only Seder is perfectly acceptable. Do not feel any type of way about that. Okay, alternative Seder plate items. There was a lot of questions about people coming from different backgrounds, having kind of their own personal history be a little bit closer to this type of story than ours is, certainly. This is a preparation, right? Before you're sitting down at the table, maybe ask your child whose spouse might be from a different background, would it be okay, right? Would it be okay to add something to the Seder plate to represent that struggle as well? What does your spouse think about, like, would they be open to that, right? Coming in, not making demands, just being really open, saying, this is an important part of our ritual. And, you know, I hear so many similarities in where your spouse's background is coming from. We would really like to honor that at the table this year. How would they feel about participating in that? How would they feel about maybe saying something about that if they're comfortable, right? Coming in and just being open, saying whatever they want to do. Even if they say no this year, it's the first step. Maybe in a couple of years, they'll feel a little bit more open and more able to to share more of their life. But you reaching out and saying, I care about you, I see the similarities here, I don't want to ignore that. That's big. That's really big. So don't underestimate how important just reaching out and asking can be. There are many modern additions to the table or to the Seder plate. Miriam's cup, right, is a modern addition that's gained a lot of following. I love Miriam's cup. Miriam's cup is normally filled with water because Miriam was the source of water while they were wandering in the desert until her death. So the mythology goes, right, the midrash goes, that wherever Miriam went, there was a well that followed her. And that was really, walking through the desert, not a lot of water. She was literally the source of life for the community. And to raise her up as a prophetess, which she was, give her due after a few thousand years of not quite getting it. I'm a big fan of that. There was, especially in the 80s and 90s, there was a very popular practice of adding an empty chair for Soviet Jewry. So if you have someone who's coming from that background as well, that's an interesting thing to keep or to talk about. Many people have heard of the orange on a Seder plate for LGBTQ rights. A fifth cup for the hostages. Yep. Adding chairs. I think many of us have seen the tables that have been laid out in different places for the hostages. So all of these are really wonderful ways to kind of bring in other aspects of our world and reality without taking away anything from the Seder itself, right? There's plenty of room on the table. We can add stuff. It's not taking anything away. Great. I will say many people have added tomatoes for immigrant worker rights in Florida in particular, and fair trade chocolate. So, if you really like the fair trade chocolate, this can be a really good excuse to get a lot of it and have that on the Seder plate. For singing, all right, I want to spend a little bit of time on singing. I love singing. I'm not great. I'm not a great singer, but I'm a very loud singer. And I might not always be on key, but I'm always having fun. And that's the most important thing. In fact, many of our Passover songs are crazy. They're totally insane. Haggadah is the craziest thing I've ever heard. And that's what makes it fun, right? That's what makes it memorable. But for anybody who isn't already very excited to sing, sometimes first of all, make sure you have song sheets. So check your Haggadah. Make sure that the Haggadah itself has many of the songs. If it doesn't have a song that you want, just print out some song sheets so everybody has the words. And if you want, have a backing track, like ready on your Spotify app or ready on my parents still have a CD player, so ready on your CD player to go, so that there's a little bit background vocals that you can sing with, and that really opens the space for people to try and sing along. It's not an a cappella performance where you feel like, oh my God, everybody's going to listen to me. You can add a little extra there. It's for a little comfort for many people. We normally save singing, right? A lot of the songs are supposed to be towards the end, but that is not the only place they can be. I really love adding all the frog jumping songs, especially if you have active kids like mine. They are jumping up and down. Let's get them jumping a good 4 minutes, right? Just jump, 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 jump. Then maybe they'll be able to sit down for like a good 10 minutes. Who knows? We pray. But the frog song, the Pharaoh song, there's an incredible world of Jewish music out there right now. I don't know if you've heard of, like, I come from the Reform movement. Reform rock stars is a very real thing, and they all have a Passover compilation. So you can have some fun on YouTube, just going around and trying to see, you know, what songs there are, and you can just play them. You don't have to be, you don't have to memorize them. You don't have to suddenly learn guitar. You can just play them on your phone or play them on your CD player, and incorporate part of that into the Seder. So as many places as possible to insert singing, I would thoroughly support that.
Rabbi Jessica, Ed asks, could you speak more about what you might do with a fifth cup of wine to recognize the hostages? Where would you put it? What would you fill it with?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I actually haven't heard it yet. I'm not surprised to hear it. I know the extra chair. So that's a good question. You know what, Terry, I will look it up a little bit, and perhaps we can send back the answer with the follow-up email, unless somebody here has more information.
I think, Ed, you want to jump in and answer it yourself? Since you put the answer in chat, you can just unmute if you want.
Well, I started thinking about it. I thought, oh, maybe we're drinking a fifth cup of wine to recognize the hostages, but I'm not sure of that. I just am guessing.
Yeah, no, I'll look it up because the question of would you drink the wine, would you not drink the wine, would you fill it with wine, would you leave it empty? That's a really good question, and it's complicated, right? Because drinking wine is a joyous thing, right? That's the rabbis had a whole conversation, right? What constitutes oneg? What constitutes joy? We said food. And what constitutes like a lot of joy? We said wine, right? Alcohol. So let me get back to you, unless somebody is going to do like a wiki dive right now and go to it.
Yeah, there is a thing going around now on the internet. It's actually a Yehi Ratzon. May it be God's will for the release of the hostages to take place. So it's actually drunk along with a prayer. I'm seeing the prayer here in Hebrew online. I need a little bit of time to think about it to translate it into English. But if anybody wants it, they want to tell me their email, I'm happy to forward this on.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, third candle for them. Yeah. Listen, we are incredibly creative people, right? Our rituals show just how creative we can be. Bring that to the table, right? Bring all of that to the table. So if there's a particular tradition that you want to explore, if there's a particular new idea that you want to learn more about, go and learn it and do it. Just, you have all the permissions. These are your rituals. So if there's something important to you, this is a great place to highlight it. Don't be worried about like overshadowing the story. You can't overshadow the entire holiday. There's a lot of stuff in this holiday, right? Adding a couple things, adding a prayer, adding some thoughts, adding a question, all of those are perfectly acceptable and actually really important ways to continue to maintain our empathy, right? And do the work that the Seder is asking us to do, right? To really feel the process of going from enslavement to freedom. Great. Okay, so a few more practicals. Everybody should have the same Haggadah. Okay, so everybody at the table should have access to the same prayer book. That being said, there's a really interesting tradition of having multiple different prayer books on the table so that you can like look at a couple different ones and notice the differences. One of the big differences that we'll see throughout, especially if you get different like generations, you know, a Haggadah from the 50s, a Haggadah that has pictures from the like 1700s, the difference between the four sons, dramatic, right? For many of the depictions, they're adults, they're full adults. And you really have to change the way you understand the passages about the four sons. If they're not just, you know, annoying 9-year-olds who are kind of rebelling, these are 30-year-old men who are saying this, you have to think differently about it. So having both of those options can be really fun. If you have a family that kind of is really book focused, you can find incredible ones. You can find certain Haggadot at like Barnes and Noble at the bookstore. You can obviously find every Haggadah ever published on Amazon. But if you have access to any type of Judaica store, they'll probably have different Haggadot. And I will say the PJ Library Haggadah is actually really good. The PJ Library Haggadah is really good, whether it's for kids or not. I've been using that one for a while. And if you write to them, they'll normally be able to send you like extra copies. Yeah.
Rabbi Jessica, can I just put into chat? It's an awful link. It is. I'm just putting it in because somebody shared it in our Facebook, and it's a PJ PDF, and it tells the story in sort of pictures, 10 pictures. So if you click on the link, I just put it in chat. Do you see it? I'll put it in again. But anyway, I actually printed it out, and I'm going to use it to tell the story. I'm going to give one to, each person at the table.
Perfect. Yes, you'll get all these links as well, but the Jewish Grandparents Network has some amazing sources. 18 Doors has amazing sources. Right? There's a lot of incredible Jewish educators who have put a lot of work into creating different inserts or Haggadot. So definitely you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If you do want to reinvent the wheel, however, you can always go to haggadot.com and create like for real your own Haggadah. They have sources from a lot of different places, and you can choose what you like and put it in. So if you're really creative and you are looking for a little project before you start all of your cooking, that is another option. Haggadot.com, I think. Could be .org. Okay. Now on to the actual Seder. You're allowed to have snacks on the table. I don't know where it came from that you must starve until midnight, but that is not an intrinsic part of the Seder. We do them themed, right? A lot of deviled eggs, vegetables and dip. If you're a really good baker, right, you can make like muffins in the shape of certain things. So go get creative with it, but please don't starve yourselves or your children, right? Having food will also help the kids stay alert, where they're not just focused on like, I'm so hungry, when are we going to eat? Give them some of their little finger foods. It's okay. Everybody will be thankful for it. So I'm a big fan of eating. Great. I mentioned before that you should all have access to the same Haggadah. That way you can take turns reading, right? That way everybody can feel like they're a participant in the Seder. So, if there's a passage that has some weird words in there, that's okay. Just like say them out loud first. And that way everybody can feel like they're really participating. And also, like, when you're the one reading, you do kind of pay more attention when you know that you're up soon. So it's a good way, especially at some of our older kids, to keep them kind of focused, right? Oh, you're reading soon. You better be focused. You better make sure you know where we are. You can't be goofing off with your friends over there. Ask questions. There's some, I saw some people who created their family for questions, right? I think that was in the JGN, one of the Jewish Grandparent Network sources. Create your family questions. This would be ahead of time, right? You should do this ahead of time. What makes your family different from all other families? What are the incredible things that your family brings that not every family gets? And focus on how positive having an integrated family is. All the different things that you get to do that some other people don't, all the amazing stories that you get to hear, all of the incredible people that you get to call family, right? That can be really powerful. Be like the grandkids. This can be silly. You can be very silly. I was very used to, right, like a very strict, somber Seder. That's one way to do it. doesn't have to be the only way. If you want to get on the floor jumping with the kids like frogs, go for it. Make sure your back can take it, or your knees. Actually, it was my knees can't take it anymore. But you know, sing the songs and do the faces and just experience the Seder. And our grandkids are incredible sources of joy. And when you're able to tap into that same place of joy, it's a lot of fun. I mentioned before, sometimes you can send the kids away, right? Have them do a project so you have some adult time. There's some conversations that you want to have with just the adults. So plan that into your Seder and then make sure it happens, right? Make sure you actually say, no, you guys have a really important responsibility. We don't know the story. I don't know the story. I've only been doing this for 40 years. I don't know the story that well. You have to tell me the story. Make them go and do the play, and then you have some time. And then the final thing, have fun. Have fun. Passover is the most widely celebrated Jewish holiday in America. I think it's something like 76% of Jews do something for Passover. 20% are affiliated with any type of Jewish organization, okay? So most Jews, this is the thing that most Jews in America are doing together, right? No matter where they are, no matter how, non-affiliated they are, there's something really important and beautiful about the Passover Seder that has serious staying power. And I think part of that is that it's open for fun. It's open for connections. It's open to talk to your family, to learn more about each other, to share with each other. So the more you lean into that, the more comfortable everybody is going to be. And I think that is our time. So thank you all so much. And definitely look at the chat. There have been some incredible ideas in the chat, incredible sources in the chat. Thank you all so much. And I think we're going to have some time now to do a little bit more of that brainstorming, especially for what to do with your kids. So Terry, do you want to introduce?
Thank you. No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Rabbi Jessica. Stay on because we're going to need you. And Sarah, could I ask you to please share in chat the link to hosting an inclusive Seder guide? It's in our run of show in row 14. So if you could put that in chat. We created with JGN 18 Doors, created together hosting an inclusive Seder, a guide for grandparents, and it includes many of the ideas that Rabbi Jessica has spoken about, although it does have a different author. So we are now going to pivot. Again, thank you, Rabbi Jessica. We could have listened to you for a much longer time. Let's pivot now to our group, and we got many requests. Please, can you share ideas that we could do with young children to bring the Seder to life? Rabbi Jessica and some of our friends have already done so. So we're just going to go all informal now, and unmute yourself if you want to talk. We will spotlight you, or even better, raise your Zoom hand and go for it and share your ideas for young children. Yvonne, would you like to?
I usually, when we look for the Afikomen, I make a clues, and I have the children look for, go to different rooms, and that's they like that. It's fun.
You give them a prize?
Yes, everyone gets a prize if I because that's how we work in our family. I don't know. I don't know where the chat is. That's my problem here. I can't find it.
If you go down to your bar at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see 3 dots on the far right that says more, and you may find chat there.
I don't know. I can't find it. Oh, chat. Oh,
yeah, great.
Thanks.
I want to raise up Jan put into the chat. She takes a blue blanket and have the kids run under it. Actually, right, doing that section is a little bit easier for my heart than focusing on the plague section. I think that's a really good idea to focus on the getting through the sea, right? The feeling of, oh no, the Pharaoh's coming. Oh, what are we going to do? The sea is here. And look into some midrash. I know everybody else is supposed to be saying, but I have to tell you, the story of Nachshon is such a wonderful story for kids in particular to hear about. So the midrash says that Moses, right, was on the rock putting his staff up and nothing was happening, right? The sea was just nice and peaceful and calm, no splitting. And Moses is unclear about what he's supposed to be doing right now. And it was just a member of the tribe, a guy, just a random guy named Nachshon, who kind of realized that God wanted us to take the first steps. So he started walking into the water and he started singing Mi Chamocha. And right, this is the midrash that explains why it's Mi Chamocha and then Mi Kamocha. The idea is that he was singing Mi Chamocha, how powerful, how great are you, Adonai, Mi Chamocha. And then the water got above his nose, or above his mouth. And so he said, Mi Kamocha, right? Because he was spitting out the water. And once the water got above his nose, the sea split, right? Because he was ready to sacrifice himself for the greater good. He was ready to take those first steps without knowing for sure what was going to happen. So it's a good story of perseverance, right? And a lot of our kids can use that type of story as well.
And Susan includes a version, a homemade version of Dayenu. And I do want to show you that we will include the chat transcript in our follow-up tomorrow, as well as the recording, because many people couldn't make it. We had close on 400 people sign up for Rabbi Jessica's session. Any suggestions for what to give a 3 to 7-year-olds for finding the Afikomen?
Do they like chocolate?
Friends, we need you. We need you. I actually found at some like $5 store, it's a form of a magnetiles game that you make your own game with these magnetile fake things. So the kids can do the magnetiles and create your own game. It comes with dice. I also got some frog straws. For the older kids, I've got 2 9-year-olds coming. I got them, what do you call those toys that where you have to, Rubik's Cube?
Oh, God.
And they've got a timer in the middle so that you can keep timing yourself to see if you can beat your own best time.
I can't do Rubik's Cube at all. I can't even imagine timing myself. That's crazy.
Sharon says, stale Hanukkah guilt. Come on, Sharon. I do not believe you of all people.
But a book, a book.
Money, packets of seeds, something Jewish. Always give a $1 coin. Okay, anybody else want to share cute ideas? We did put in chat earlier. You'll see it again when we send it to you. The Jewish Grandparents Network Passover Discovery Kit. So Sarah, if you'd like to pop that into chat again, that would be great. And that has got a ton of ideas for young kids, ages 3 to 8 for the Seder.
I have a suggestion. If you have a box from Amazon or a gift and you put a very little doll in it, and then you move the box from one person down the table, up and down, as if it's floating in the water. And then when it gets to one of the children, she can be the princess who finds the baby and takes the baby out of the water.
Oh, that's really nice. That's very sweet. Very cool. Thank you. Oh yeah, and I love the idea of putting the name and year in your Haggadah so that you can track, how many generations are using this. Wonderful.
All right, we are happy to stay on if there are any more ideas. So we'll wait another minute. And if not, we will say goodnight to you and wish you a Chag Pesach Sameach. Any last minute suggestions? All right. Well, thank you. Thank you to Rabbi Jessica for presenting so beautifully and in such a friendly fashion. To all of you, to our friends at 18 Doors, Molly, thank you so much. And to my colleagues, David Raphael, our executive director, Eileen Vogelstein, our president, and Sarah Reed for all your help. I really appreciate it. And to all of you, thank you for coming. Chag Pesach Sameach. Have a most wonderful holiday. And I know that you join me in wishing that there will be peace now and always in Israel and in the Middle East altogether. So thank you to you all.